Stella embodies exactly what Art and Embassies is about. It's friends and partners who lend works of art to an international audience of friends and partners. And some people have come up to me and they've said, why don't you just get a budget and buy this stuff? That way you don't have to go ask for it all the time. But that's not the point. The point is getting people like Ambassador Bernstein, working with artists and museums and galleries, and all for a common good and working towards international relations. That's what it's about. So, no, I don't want a budget to buy this stuff. This is more important. And also, it's just plain more fun. So, enjoy yourselves, and thanks for coming, and thanks for having me. And Ambassador Bernstein embodies the best of the ambassadors and their use of works of art and putting them to work. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. It now gives me a great pleasure to introduce mother of 3, grandmother of 10. I'm not allowed to say how long we've been married, but a great lady who deserves a lot of credit. My wonderful predecessor had 7 kids and 4 dogs, and the house had a little wear and tear, so she had to do a little fixing up with a lot of help. And we're happy to have Sue Meyer from the State Department and from Washington here visiting us, and want to thank her also for all that she's done to help us. Wilma not only is the one responsible for putting our home together here, but also putting this magnificent collection together. And I'm happy to introduce her, who's now going to introduce our guest of honor, Wilma.
First, I want to welcome everyone to our home in Copenhagen, which we're enjoying very much, and we're happy to have all of you here. And it is my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce someone whom I've admired for many years, and we're so proud to have visit us in Copenhagen. He's so renowned and has done so many things, I have to read a little bit about him.
You don't have to.
I want to. Frank Stella was born in Malden, Massachusetts, and he studied at Princeton University. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Stella's work was included in several landmark exhibits of abstract painting at the Metropolitan Museum and the Whitney Museum in New York. In the 70s, Stella's work moved toward three-dimensional paintings, later toward wall constructions with multiple components. Coming to prominence in the late 1950s and early as one of America's great abstract painters, Stella's early works presented flat geometric design that evolved into three-dimensional canvases. Since the late 1980s, Stella has increasingly turned his attention to sculpture and art for public places, often working on a massive scale. As exemplified by Prinz Friedrich von Homburg. Can you pronounce this for me? Ein Schauspiel.
Yeah.
And it is now in front of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where Stuart and I are from. We're natives, so we're very proud to have that in our beautiful city, and it's in a place of prominence outside at the entrance to the museum. This is the first monumental outdoor sculpture by Stella to enter a public collection in the United States. Stella has lived and worked in New York for the past 40 years, producing a varied body of work that includes paintings, prints, relief sculptures, and more recently, public art and architecture. Hockenheim, which is the wall relief that you'll see in our dining room, is from the Circuit series. Mr. Stella was inspired by sports car racing, which obviously he loves. Its curves, movement, and energy that surround the whole event of sports racing. I want you all to know that when we first were announced here and I was able to go and pick the paintings that we would show in our embassy or in our residence, the first painting that I picked was your painting. And I decided that I was going to do all of the rest of the art around that. So we were fortunate that they were able to lend it to us and that you were so kind as to lend it and give it to the Arts and Embassy program. So we know that it holds a place of prominence. You can't miss it. I think it sets the tone for the whole house and all of the art. So we're happy to have all of you here, and we're especially happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to say one thing besides thanking you all for being here and thanking the ambassador and his wife for such a lovely evening. I mean, this is, I suppose, a special house in a lot of ways, but even for me, and I consider myself to have visited a lot of homes that exhibit art, I love the way they're stacked in here. You get more punch per square meter here than any other place. I mean, I just love one painting after another. I don't know, I suppose in some ways artists always think they're taking it on the chin from the interior decorators, but I like the furniture down low and out of the way, and you can really see the paintings. And I want to thank you very much. It's in really what I think is the right spirit for art. I could stop there, but I just want to say one more thing about the embassy program, which is it was 25 years old in 1989, and I don't know how old I was 25 years before that. But one of the things about the program, the very beginning of the program, or when it became really active, started with Henry Geldzahler, who was a curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and with Ambassador and Mrs. Woodward. And they began to collect paintings and then give them to the State Department to send around. One of their dearest friends was Jane Thompson, and Ambassador Llewellyn Thompson at that time. It was the middle of the Cold War, and they had an apartment in Moscow. And I must say that there's a painting now of mine in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's called Marrakesh, but it's an abstract painting of sort of red and yellow stripes running into each other. But to see the photograph of that over the couch in the Moscow apartment of Ambassador Llewellyn is really something to see. It brings 1963 and the Cold War back with a kind of funny twist, as it were. And the last thing it would be that somehow the Art and Embassies program became involved with the government in a slightly bigger way than shows up in the Art and Embassies. I believe, but I can't prove it. There's a lot of people who probably have other ideas. But anyway, the path that USIA or USIS, whatever it is, followed in the late 60s was one of sending American art around the world, as it were. And it was the first opening up in Asia and in Eastern Europe. USIA sent a very big show to Prague, Moscow, Warsaw, and Moscow, which had a tremendous impact in Eastern Europe, and probably in some ways might have played out an impact on how things ultimately turned out. And another version of that went to Southeast Asia, the same kind of thing, to India, and ultimately into Australia. And I think it stopped in Bangkok, but I'm not sure about it. It had one other stop. And the end of the story is that the USIA, the Art and Embassies program, and the notion of giving a print that would be editioned so that it would be able to be in all of the embassies. I think that I did that out of a slightly perverse twist, which is I was tired of listening to, I was tired of being called an imperialist artist, a tool of the USIA. And so if I was going to be truly imperialist, I was going to mimic, at least in some way, the real imperialist, the British Empire, and the sun would never set on my print.
Thank you, Frank. It's, I just can't tell you how much we are honored to have a living legend of the American art world here in our home. And I want you also to know, Frank, that assembled here today is a very special group. This group represents a very broad spectrum of the finest that Denmark has to offer in the art world and related areas. And they were just so excited to be here, as we were excited to be here. Let me just take one more moment to tell you a little bit about the residence, because the home was built in 1885, and our government was able to obtain it right after the war. And it was occupied during the war by the commander of the Nazi occupation force. And I think it's quite nice that Americans are now in possession of this wonderful home that sits on 14 acres, and we get a lot of use out of it, and it works very well. We have a couple more minutes for dinner, and Frank, I'm going to impose upon you, because I'm going to impose upon you just to tell everybody how you created that piece of art, which is so special. It was hanging in the State Department when Wilma spotted it and said, we've got to have that here.
Well, I don't know exactly how I created it, but I'd just like to say one thing for the record. I mean, it is, I think it's part of, it was a gift of Doug Kramer, who was a great collector of art from California, and also a great creator of Love Boat. I guess I think that's where he got the money to buy the painting. Is it Love Boat? I don't know. Some of you got it. But anyway, this painting was part of a series of paintings, as it pointed out, related to automobile racing. It's not the only vice I have. I mean, being an automobile racing fan, I also breed and race my own horses, which is why I'm hustling still at the age of 65. And it's hard to come up with all those oats. But anyway, in this piece, the part of it that's, most of the pieces were made up of parts, and the parts are put together at different layers, and it is supposed to be about circuits, about the courses that you travel around. And I'm sure a lot of you here in Scandinavia, everyone likes to drive fast, and you can go over to Germany, there's no speed limit. But anyway, things, when your sort of life depends on it and you're going too fast and everything, things look different. And it's just a way of seeing, a way of paying attention, and a thing about vision, and actually a visual memory. In order to go really fast, it's very hard. Nobody does it fast the first time. You can do it fast the second time if you can remember what was there. You're not really seeing it anymore. You're only going by memory. But anyway, in this case, that's how these pieces came about. They are a little bit fragmented, and they are a little bit about the edge of your vision, about seeing through things and seeing around them, and in a way trying to put them together and trying to remember them while everything is moving, while things are in a state of flux. I hope the food is ready by now.
Yes. I want you to enjoy the evening and listen to the music and enjoy all this art when you stop and think that museums, artists, art collectors lend to all the embassies all over the world because they're so proud and so want to support and help our government. Art that, if you put a value on it, would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So please enjoy, have a wonderful evening. Frank's looking forward to talking to many of you, and we invite you all for dinner, and thank you again for being here, and thank you for allowing Wilma and myself to be part of this wonderful country. We truly love being here. Thank you. Follow me, gang.
If you want to really like this.
You gotta open some windows, it's too hot. Can't you just crack a little bit? Can't we just do a little cracking? Yeah, baby. They got those little hooks where you can just open that one. So I saw... Come. Everybody follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Time to eat. Oh, that feels a little better, that air. Wow. Yeah. I can't get people to start.
Sort mand. Så da han så Jørgens kørekort, så sagde han, where in the hell is Denmark?
Please, come in.
Vi slap.
Han var godt klar over det.
Friendly warning. Der er jo faktisk visse stater, hvor de har givet det fri igen. Altså i Montana, hvor det virkelig er ude, og hvor benzin er billig. Ja.
Oh, yes, we talked. Yes, we talked. Please. Thanks for your help today. Thank you. Dorothea does them. She does them. And I wanted you to come today with Sue because I wanted to say from Sue how much I appreciate what a great job you did. That was why I wanted you. Thank you. Absolutely. I want to introduce you to the French also when we get a chance. Well, I mean, if I find them, I'll grab you.
Tak. Ja, tak. Jo. Ja, det er mig, der har skrevet det.
Guests, we have lived in the place for 5 or more years.
Several months because and then suddenly I get the solution.
I mean, other than everything was